This program is proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.
Good evening, viewers. I'm Malcolm Wyra, and welcome to another edition of Infocus. In this session, we are joined by the Asian Development Bank Country Director, Mr. Said Zaidansyah. We look at some of ADB's support programs in the various sectors in PNG. Mr. Zaidansyah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Firstly, can you clarify the type of institution the Asian Development Bank is?
Thank you so much, Mr. Wyra, Malcolm. So Asian Development Bank is a international financial institution. It's a multilateral development bank that is owned by member countries. There are 68 member countries, that comprises the shareholders of ADB. And basically, the role of ADB is to help our member countries, particularly those in Asia and the Pacific, to be able to develop, their economies, develop their people. So the main mandate of ADB is actually, to help create a prosperous, inclusive region that we have here. And in doing so, what we do is we provide financing, we provide technical assistance, and we facilitate partnerships and engagements with other development partners and other stakeholders, all with the aim of being able to help our member countries grow and expand their development journey. So we're not, let's say, a bank, commercial bank in the likes of, let's say, PSP or Kina Bank, ANZ or Westpac. So we don't accept third-party deposits. We do provide loans to the private sector, to non-sovereign entities, as we call it. But particularly in PNG, most of our financing would go to the government and basically to help them, in terms of developing, a number of different sectors in the country. In PNG, we are very much involved in the transport sector. So transport sector basically would be around, 65% of our operations. That would be in both roads and in civil aviation. We're also active in the energy sector, trying to help basically further electrify the country, bring basically more electricity to various households, expand the supply of electricity in the country, including, trying to help create or help establish basically a more clean, renewable energy in the country. So we're also working very much in that sector with the different players, including with Power PNG, for example, in the case of energy. We also involved in the education sector. We're involved in the health sector. In the education sector, we were very much working on TVET, technical and vocational education, working with 10 different technical colleges across the country. We're also building hospitals, for example, in 8 provinces, rural hospitals, district hospitals. We're also very much involved in basically financial access, trying to help, provide access to finance for the populations, working with microfinance institutions in the country. And these are the sectors that we're very much involved in at present. We are also looking at helping the country on let's say, urban water services. So these are roughly the areas that we work on. But we do have capabilities to support the non-sovereign, the private sector. We are now looking into this space as well. Another thing that we have capability on is basically, helping the country facilitate more PPP, public-private partnership. How to basically structure delivery of public services in the way that we can then attract private sector to come in. So collaborations between the public and the private sector. So in many ways, we are, as we are financial institutions, but our main focus is on development. Our clients are mainly government agencies, as well as private sector. In PNG, unfortunately, we're still quite nascent at that, on that side. But as a financial institutions, we do provide loans and and so forth.
So how is the ADB aligning its support programs with existing government of Papua New Guinea development plans?
So with regards to that, every single support that we provide, right, we would have to align it with MTDP. For example, MTDP4. Currently, the government launched in July 2023 MTDP4. So areas of our support will have to be aligned with one of the 12 strategic priority areas of the government under MTDP4. And it's also worth mentioning here that we do have close collaborations with the government on this front. So we would, every few years, prepare country partnership strategies. And in that country partnership strategies, we would discuss with the government what are the priority areas of development for the government. And that priority areas will be the focus of ADB support. So, in many ways, we ensure that what we provide is demand-driven, not supply-driven, and are certainly aligned with the government priorities and development plans. So as mentioned earlier, at this stage, we are ensuring that whatever support we provide, these supports are aligned with MTDP4, particularly, obviously, in the context of our support to various government agencies and stakeholders.
Thank you, Said.
Thank you.
We now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. Now, Said, I understand the Asian Development Bank also publishes what it calls the Asian Development Economic Outlook. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, of course. I mean, the Asian Development Outlook is basically, is a document issued by our economics department. So as a again, coming back to your earlier question, as a multilateral financial institution that focuses on development, a development bank is how we call ourselves, right? We do also provide we have an economic department that does economic research that provides also development outlooks into the country and basically, provide analysis in terms of what it thinks or what it feels will be the development trajectory of the country, let's say in the next, in a year period. We typically launch our Asian Development Outlook every April, and then we would have a supplementary later on in the year. So we launched our ADO, Asian Development Outlook, for last year, looking at, among other things, the economic projection for 2024. And basically, our latest forecast is, economic growth for PNG would be around 2.6%. This did not yet, because this came in earlier last year, did not factor in the Porgera, reopening, the Porgera mine reopening, which would have positive impact, obviously, on the growth. But also, unfortunately, there there was a Black Wednesday on the 10th of January. That also would have that we imagine would have an impact on the economy. I mean, there was a loss or a damage of around 1 billion kina in an economy of 101% of the economy was affected by the damage, by the looting that occurred on that unfaithful day, right? So we would be looking at basically issuing our Asian Development Outlook again by April this year, and we would then basically provide a forecast for economic growth in 2024, and that would have reflected the Porgera reopening, as well as the impact of the Black Wednesday. That time we would have a better understanding on, how that sort of impact the economy more broadly.
Now, I understand in terms of ADB's operational challenges, there are quite certain issues that currently confront the Asian Development Bank. Can you highlight for us what are they?
For us, we are probably among the largest development partner in the country. Our portfolio currently is 1.4 billion US dollar, roughly, in an economy of, let's say, 30-something billion US dollar. So our portfolio is quite sizable in the country. So we are able to sort of work quite well with the government, with the different stakeholders. But there are challenges, to be very frank, right? Some of these challenges often would be the availability of land. We're very much involved in transport, in civil aviation, and obviously, land becomes an important component. So, I mean, in many ways, we rely on the government to provide the land, and there are challenges with acquiring land, but I'm sure that the government would be in the best position to basically help us navigate that challenge, right? Other challenges that we face often, to be very frank with you, would be, let's say, the weak capacity. The weak capacity, I think both in terms of the capacity of often what you find is that our counterparts, they're overwhelmed, right? They're not that many in a particular ministry, but then they're handling a lot, they have a lot on their plate. Another issue that we would encounter sometimes would be counterpart funding, right? So our project ADB is not able to provide 100% of the financing. We would expect the government to provide a certain percentage of the funding. So typically, and that percentage can vary, but roughly we would provide 95% of the funding, with the government providing 5%, let's say 10% of the counterpart funds. So sometimes, the availability of the counterpart funds on a timely basis can be not always, but at times can be challenging, let's say. So these are some of the challenges. I guess another challenge often is that the government, does have their own procedures in terms of processing certain certain documents and so forth, right? That can at times take longer than expected. But we've dealt with the government for many years. The government has been a member of ADB since 1971, so even before it became an independent state of Papua New Guinea. So we understand these challenges. We're working with the government, continuously to make sure that we can move forward and we can navigate these challenges, right? So, for example, let's say with regards to counterpart funding, ADB would often would front load the initial funding, and then the government can come in later. On the capacity issue, we would basically, as appropriate, we can then provide supplement resources to help the government, provide additional consultants and so forth to help the government address some of these challenges. So there are operational challenges. I would not be, truthful if I say there aren't. But whatever these challenges are, these are challenges that we can address, and challenges that we work very closely with the government to address.
Okay. Now, how does the Asian Development Bank ensure that its funded infrastructure projects does not in any way have any detrimental impacts on local environment and communities?
Well, that's a good question. So ADB, since 1995, we would have a policy to make sure that all our projects are done in a way that it is not detrimental, that it does not cause harm to the environment, to the affected people, and to the indigenous people, right? So we have what we call a safeguard policy statement. This is international best practice on how to address and mitigate environmental, let's say, adverse environmental impact, or if there are projects where you do need involuntary resettlement to occur, that the people affected are compensated, right? And their livelihood will be equal or better than before the project. It's also worth noting that ADB does not just compensate people, let's say, for the loss of homes, but also for the loss of income. So when the people affected, when someone is affected by, let's say, a loss of income because the market that they have stalled in, have to be moved, and or the bridge that they need to go would have to be, let's say, reconstructed, moved and so forth. We would make sure we would take measures to ensure that their livelihoods are not impacted adversely.
Okay. In terms of environment, what support interventions does the Asian Development Bank have in place for climate change?
Yeah. So basically, for us, we are a climate bank, and it is important for us to be able to address the challenges of climate change. So we do have a number of measures to sort of address climate change mitigation and climate change adaptations. So on climate change mitigation, for example, we are working to basically help the government in their effort to have more renewable energy power plants. We're working on hydropower plant in a number of places. We're looking at also helping the government to achieve their carbon neutral target and net zero emission target by 2050. We track, we monitor, we help the government, the CCDA, Climate Change Development Authority, to track the greenhouse gas emission of any particular sector, development sector, with SOEs as well. And then we plan to do more in that regard. With regards on adaptations, we want to make sure that the project that we develop, can withstand the pressure of, let's say, landslides, flooding, and other disasters, other natural disasters caused by climate change. So we are very much mindful of making sure that our support does address the challenges of climate change. We aspire to be the Asia's climate bank, and we do have financing to hopefully achieve that ambition. So so we're looking at basically at an Asia Pacific scale, right, to make sure that $100 billion of our financing are considered as climate finance, for example. Yeah.
Thank you, Said.
Thank you.
We now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back to Infocus. Still in the studio with me is the Asian Development Bank Country Director, Mr. Said Zaidansyah. Now, Said, ADB for the last 3 years has been financing the state-owned enterprises, or SOE reform, to promote SOE governance and transparency. Can you tell us some of the notable achievements so far?
You're absolutely right. We've been working with the Ministry of SOE, with Kumul Consolidated Holding, for the past, from 2019 to 2022, to find ways to address the issues of governance and accountability with regards to SOEs. And in those efforts, I think we've done a number of strong deliverables, obviously together with the government. Some of these that I can mention, for example, would be, the introduction of the Kumul Consolidated Holdings Act. We were also quite involved in trying to promote female leadership in the SOEs. When we started in 2019, I believe there were only 2 female leaders out of 48. And at the end of the program, in 2022, there were around 10 out of 66. So, there was much more representation of female in the board, and we also made sure that they were properly trained, and we also worked with the government of New Zealand, working with the New Zealand Institute of Directors to provide the training, to provide the capacity building necessary for the female leaders, but also for the other SOE board members. We've also basically worked on the financial management of the SOEs, and another point that I suppose worth noting is that at the time that the program had been completed, I'm pleased to note that KCH was able to provide dividend to the government. Obviously, that is due to the successful management of the company, and that allowed the dividend to be shared. But we hope that the SOE reform that had been undertaken was an important contributing factor to better management of some of the SOEs that allowed for Kumul Consolidated Holding to be able to provide that dividend.
Mr. Said Zaidansyah, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, viewers, that's all the time we have for this edition of Infocus. Do join us again next week, Monday, on our regular time slot of 7 p.m. for another edition of Infocus. Till then, good night.
This program was proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.